Okay, excited to be chatting with Steven Morse today and for another Gamma Partner Artist Feature interview. Stephen and I met through an old friend in Violetta Zeroni, so always shout out to Violetta. Yeah, as mentioned, Stephen's a partner artist. He's got a couple of collections up live on Gamma in Cosmogenesis and Flora Pulp, which I'm sure we're going to dig into. But before we do that, let's find out who is Steven Morse. So, Steven, welcome. Tell us about who you are. You can go right back to when you were a child if you want. Like, when did you first start feeling creative? Like, really tell your story.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, excited to get into my story and talk about the work. So I appreciate that. Yeah, as far as being a creator, I started when I was a kid, as early as I could remember. I'm an 80s baby. I was born in 83. So highly influenced by, the pop art scene and very exposed as a child to, the arts and museums and so on and so forth. My father's an art collector. And as early as I was given a camera, which was a Polaroid, that's really when I started to delve into photography. I was drawing. I mean, I even have books here that I was drawing out when I was a child. I don't know how old, as soon as I could pretty much start. So the interesting thing for me is my brain is a little bit both sides of creative and analytical. So, but with a focus on the creative side. And basically, yeah, my journey was creative in photography, interested in photography, film photography. I took photography courses in high school, explored that journey, and then the advent of digital photography, which really opened a lot of doors, started very early with Photoshop. I think it was one or two. I mean, it was the beginning. So I started there, but my love was for darkroom photography. There's pure magic in working in the darkroom, working with the chemicals, and capturing the image on tangible film, and then having the image come to life within those chemicals, and it's a really magical process. And as computers developed, I started to get into HTML web development. So that was kind of my early exposure to the generative side of things, if you will. So as my journey continued, I actually moved to Miami, where my father was from, in 2001. And I attended Miami-Dade College. I had an opportunity to work in real estate because I'm highly analytical. And I was working in commercial real estate for a number of years. And it was 2008 when I kind of went in, and that was when the bubble burst and the job was over. And I decided to go back to school, and I got my BFA in photography. After that, I spent 10 years as a commercial photographer. So I was utilizing my creative skills to, work for other people, creating marketing for high-end real estate, corporate portraiture, working for Fortune 500 companies, JP Morgan Chase, Burger King, related group in Miami. We started to do a lot of work with drones, and it was, very much creative, but not with the focus on my own work. I then got a call one day. I was with ASMP, which is I think it's the Associated Society for Media Photographers. I think it's the acronym. And I got a call from a photographer named Bob Adelman. Bob Adelman, not many people know him, but he is one of the foremost civil rights photographers. His most famous and iconic image is of Dr. Martin Luther King with his arm up and the "I Have a Dream" speech. He happened to live down the street from me, and he was looking for a new archivist and assistant. So I took up that opportunity, and he has an incredible archive, and I got to explore his archive and archiving, cataloging, organizing. He published over 50 books, and he was a huge inspiration to me and really helped guide me to then form my own arts journalism publication, and that kind of honed my focus in on arts journalism and basically covering the Miami art scene, which exposed me to even more kind of, I see arts journalism as kind of live curation, especially for Art Basel. So, I got to explore that, and I got to create my own events. And I actually hosted an event where I curated 5 Miami artists and a luxury real estate. It was available mansion, whatever. It was a very exciting event, and really, my love for the art is kind of global. It's curation, creation. It's focused on the commercial side originally, and from there, I think it was about 2019 where I decided to focus more on my own work. And it started to shift into focus on acting, which always had a love for, always had an affinity for. And as far as a creative, it was just of great interest to me. And I think it was it COVID times? It was about 2020. I had just shot my first fashion film, and everything was shut down after that. And from there, I kind of got into the crypto side of things from one blockchain and kind of collecting others' work. And I had an artist who really hyped me up to focus on my own work. I did not have a lot of confidence in my own work. I was kind of a closeted creator for my own personal work. And really the journey has kind of taken off from there to then, finding art on Bitcoin. I mean, I can go into all sorts of details from the crypto side, but I'm sure we can explore that.
Yeah, we definitely will. Let's go backwards before we go forwards. You said it right at the start, you and I are a very similar vintage. It was more analog. We weren't that far off digital, obviously, in the 90s, but we were still exposed to that sort of thing prior to its advent. Talk to us about, I know it was obviously like, you and I both we were still probably in our teens, but tell us about what you remember about that sort of transition and the doors that it opened up as you moved from, like you said, a Polaroid photograph to I still remember my first digital cameras and playing around and not having to wait for whether or not you did it in your own darkroom or whether or not you took it to the old, I suppose, photography shop to get the photos developed and you'd have to wait and see what you even took. And now you could, and then you could see it automatically and start curating yourself. But yeah, tell us about that transition. What do you remember of it?
I mean, well, the interesting thing was with, Polaroids, you have that instant gratification.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. They were sort of like the original digital instant gratification that was in the physical world. You're right. In comparison to film camera, but still was quite you could, it was printed. You couldn't, just remove it. It tangibly existed.
Yeah, for sure. And really what the segue for me was to 35 millimeter film and then being exposed to all sorts of alternative and experimental processes within photography. Early on, even in my high school, I was very lucky. The high school was very interesting. In the early 2000s, it was like 99, they built this brand new darkroom, which was basically at the turn of when everything was going digital. I mean, digital photography for me, it was interesting. It was exciting. There was that instant gratification, but also, not necessarily needing the tangible film. But I always really had that love for the tangible side of things, the analog side of things, knowing that I would click that shutter and I would capture that moment in time forever on a tangible piece of film. And when I click a shutter, I know 90% or more exactly what I'm getting. So my brain is there capturing in the moment, highly visual, obviously. So with digital photography, I kind of really enjoy the Photoshop side of things, compositing images, manipulating images, not necessarily the capture side of things. For me, like capturing digitally was more grounded in the commercial business just because it's not really feasible to shoot film photography. I mean, I worked for and interned with a number of film photographers, commercial photographers, and they worked in the days where, you would capture Polaroids to make sure the studio's set up and then, capture it on film. And they would be, if they're doing an event, they're up all night processing and, basically, getting all of the images ready, it's a massive undertaking. So from a business standpoint, that's, where I really see digital photography shine. But with, my foundation in being creative and Bachelor of Fine Arts in photography, really enjoying that tangible side. So, digitally, it's opened the doors to where everyone is, a photographer. We have it in our pockets. And, but I really for instance, I emphasize everybody take a photography course, traditional film photography course, because that really teaches you a lot of skills as far as composition, lighting, so many things that you can apply to not just photography. So, they have their own lanes, but I gravitate still towards the film photography. I have my fridge is full of, 15 different film stocks. I have, 50 rolls of film sitting there that I kind of go through and, take my time shooting.
Yeah, I would love to see it, except, I think probably won't get you to carry your camera to the fridge. It does make for an interesting point what you just mentioned. as much as there's a difference between the creative side and the commercial side, I'm assuming that there's some learnings from both. What did you take from the commercial side into your creative side?
Um, I would say probably, I mean, well, for one thing, studio capture, knowing how to set up studio lights, how to, and in terms of like portraiture, work with executives, and really what that forces you to do is you need to know your craft inside and out implicitly. You have to know if you're dealing with somebody who has literally 5 minutes of time and you have to capture them perfectly, and they're not a model, for instance, and everybody always comes in and, oh, you're gonna make me look beautiful, right? Just really knowing your craft and knowing how you can manipulate the lighting, whether it's artificial studio lighting or it's ambient lighting, available light in a natural environment. If you're doing environmental portraiture, that's really a strong focus. So just really knowing your craft is really essential. And yeah, and when you can produce repeatedly and you can produce consistently and you can do it well and you can do it quickly, then of course you have those repeat clients in the business. But for me, the business of photography, it's not very exciting. So that's the other thing with digital, and why I still kind of lean towards the film side of things. And I'm not really involved in the business side, is because you're really only shooting 10 to maybe 20% of the time. It's mostly pre-production, client relations, post-production, travel. It's so many things that are just not interesting, to whereas, the creative side of film photography is just that. It's just much more exciting and creative.
Yeah, it's definitely not as sexy. It's interesting though, because it needs to be done. And what about like the translation from that into the business of art? Because whether or not we like it or not, there's still the business of selling your art, even if it's in Web3 or Web2, in a more traditional sense. Obviously, the creativity side we're going to dig into, and it's why you would really do it. But in the end, still needs to potentially be sold.
Yeah, I mean, I of course, like, I think the dream of many artists is to be able to support themselves based on their creation, and not really forcing anything, creating as an expression, creating as a cathartic experience. My work is created from, founded and really based in mental health awareness as somebody who's bipolar. So for me, when I create, it's a cathartic release. It's an expression, and I get to share that with the world. So it's actually, very, very meaningful and powerful. Photography is a little bit different, in where it's our greatest time machine, and I really get to enjoy, capturing those moments and really stopping time and saving it forever. There's something really, really impressive, just and amazing, and I don't know how to really put that, but I remember, for instance, in 2022 attending NFT NYC, and I took a couple of point and shoot film cameras and a bunch of films, and I think I was walking around New York with Fidel Amos, and we were kind of just shooting, and I don't know, something about that experience, just basically literally stopping and popping in the middle of Times Square and capturing the moments, and knowing pretty much what I got, but then getting those images back. I mean, it was emotional for me. I'm a very emotional person. At the same time, very expressive, and have these other skills of acting and hosting, I guess, if you will. So diversity, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and thanks for touching on that. I've heard you mention it. I'm not sure how open you are about it. Maybe you are, like, about the mental health aspect. As much as you want to or not, talk to us about that, and how art, maybe it's a bit of a cliche, is therapeutic, or how you use it, or, just like the influence that it has over you as a person and as a creator.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm very open about my mental health struggles. If you ask, my work is grounded in it. I'm bipolar 2. I deal with general anxiety, social anxiety. On top of that, in 2023, was it 23? 23. It was 23. I was involved in a car accident, and I sustained a traumatic brain injury as well. So, I deal with these things that are, you don't necessarily see on the surface. So when I'm creating work, which I'm sure we'll touch on with Cosmogenesis and Floropop, and go over some of those things there. But it's the meaning and the intent behind it is probably a lot deeper than what anybody would see on the surface. When I create these things, I to be honest, I'm a person who deals with suicidal ideations on a daily basis. That's just the nature of my life. People see me smiling and laughing and joking, but that's just because of, having to be happy and express that and connect to people and make people laugh. I guess the greatest comedians of time, really, they were suffering for a good part, but understanding that this is life and we have to try to enjoy every moment, and I really kind of advocate for mental health awareness because I'm not the only person that struggles with these things, and it's really important that people understand that it's okay to not be okay, and if you can find some sort of outlet like creating art, then you should really embrace that, and you don't necessarily have to sell it. You can just create for that experience and enjoy that release and sharing it with the world.
Yeah, no, really, really well said, and thanks for sharing that. And it's definitely true. I think my question was more grounded in what did you learn from the commercial side in regards to that. But I think of course, creative expression is just like an outlet. Yeah, look. Again, I appreciate you being open about it. I think it definitely needs to be said. Everyone, it shouldn't be the elephant in the room like it still seems to be globally. So yeah, the more that mental health and mental health struggles and just being a real human being is shared, particularly in this space, people find it pretty easy to type things behind their keyboard, behind a PFP, that forgetting perhaps that. Whether or not, I don't know if they're forgetting, I hope they're just forgetting it, that there is a real human being behind, on the other side of the computer. It's a real thing. So, we're, again, just like, thank you for sharing that. And so, tell us about, you touched on it, the learnings that you took from studying photography and, that artistic side, the real, I guess, like, side that comes from the education, not just the experience of like continuing on as an independent artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because we just discussed this on one of my spaces, and it was kind of the focus on nature versus nurture. Seeing as that I have, a natural side to be creative, and I think it's essential for artists to explore, historically, because everything's already been done. So for me, being educated in the history of art and the history of photography and exploring experimental processes, which I had never would have explored otherwise, I was exposed to all of these things. It opens your mind creatively to be, I don't know, explore conceptual ideas. I'm very conceptual, and maybe that conceptual side came from, this grounding in education and then higher education. So being exposed to the history of art, you see how things have been done. You see how colors have been used. You're exposed to color theory. You're exposed to all of these things that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to. So again, it's like, how I emphasize people to explore and understand and study photography. It helps you learn your craft. It's like when people ask me, what's the best camera to get? It's the camera that you're going to be willing to learn how to use and explore, and then maybe explore the history of photography and see how it's been done and exposed before. So education is really not essential, right? I mean, you can be, of course, an artist and create on intuition and express yourself and self-taught. But I really did find a huge benefit, and I really enjoyed thoroughly my experience. Going to school and learning these things, and I actually excelled most when I went to fine art school, and that's where my grades were actually the best. And just exploring everything, and at the same time, travel, I think, is also hugely beneficial to artists. And the same thing with not just the exposure to the educational side, but seeing how other cultures get to explore art and how they utilized art and maybe utilized colors and captured history and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it's a really good thing for artists to explore, and I understand a lot of artists don't necessarily have that opportunity, but I appreciated it.
Yeah, totally. And you've had these different experiences. You've had the art school. You've had this commercial experience, and you also mentioned that time with Bob Adelman, which I didn't realize. I hadn't heard his name, I must be honest. It's a very famous photograph. I need to look into him more. I just quickly Googled him. Okay, there we go. So yeah, you were lucky enough to spend time with him. I'm not sure if you still do or not, but yeah, tell us about that experience because obviously, like working with or for or like being mentored by the pros or the masters is also another incredible part of one's learning. You must have taken a lot out of that.
Yeah, and it started before that with an internship with a commercial photographer who was incredibly talented. But when Bob reached out to me, I really wasn't sure who he was. You think of other big names in civil rights movement, and Bob, I'm getting goosebumps because I became very close to Bob. He was a huge mentor. He was kind of like a fatherly figure. I mean, it was a very solitary experience working in his studio and archive, and my time with him was very direct. I mean, we spent a lot of time working together, but his archive spanned not just civil rights, and he didn't just produce 50 books. he he covered the pop art movement. Bob was best friends with Roy Lichtenstein. He shot Andy on the Couch. He covered, voters' rights issues. He covered pimps in the 70s. I mean, his portfolio is really unbelievable. And it was this honor and pleasure and a completely unique experience to explore his archive, to be able to handle these negatives, to be able to work with that negative. I mean, the I Have a Dream speech negative is torn in half, right? I had to stitch that together. I printed the entire 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. I printed that entire show. I worked with all those negatives. He has hundreds of thousands of images. And it's a really, really incredible archive. So he's lesser known because, interestingly enough, Bob did not focus on the fine art side of things. He found success in licensing his images to, let's say, books and publications. I was working with media outlets and, books and documentaries, images of the span of his archive and the vastness of the things he covered is really, really incredible. And once you start to look into all of that, it's amazing. And the fact that he's lesser known is really, really crazy, but that's because of his focus. And he found, when I say success, immense success. I mean, when I met Bob, he had just sold his archive for a lot of money. So he found great success in that, and he was already in his 80s. But that experience, at times it could have been very lonely and solitary, working alone in his studio and archive, but I was surrounded with incredible equipment and obviously his images and, large format printers. And I had full control over everything. And I like to have control, of course, control within, Bob's eye. Right. So, it was a thoroughly enjoyable experience. And I don't know that I would be where I am without that, without really the guidance. I mean, Bob was the one who suggested I start some sort of publication. And, Pork Belly Times was the name of my publication. And that really got me to explore my own portfolio because it got me into events. So I basically started a publication, which got me into events and things like Ultra Music Festival even, and all the Art Basel events. And I really got to explore that and explore art and then make a whole lot of connections within the art world, which then I kind of have been, utilizing today with my own work. So it's kind of segued, and it was really part of my journey, and definitely a highlight because obviously not many people get to ever experience anything like that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine, to be honest. And so tell us about, what was his advice and what did you take into your own publication, and then elaborate more on your own publication.
So Bob actually wanted me to cover like nightlife and the Miami party scene, which I live here and I've lived here for 2001, but I'm not a party person. I'm very much a homebody. I like being in the house. My dog is behind me. I like, to be here and to create and to kind of be a very private person. So there, I guess really what it was is, his emphasis on finding something that I love and I wanted to expose and to be part of. And since I've always had this love for art, not just my work and creating, just art in general, coming from a family of art collector and my, my father, my parents, and then being exposed to museums and archives and all of these things as a child, that's where the light bulb went off, and and Bob kind of instigated that, and that's when I formed Pork Belly Times. And for a number of years, I was I was gaining access to all sorts of events, Art Basel, the main event, and all the satellite events, and just going day after day and interviewing artists as well. So just it was really an amazing experience, and it really expanded my archive to focus on something that I love. And that experience of going around and that live curation, that's really kind of what I see as arts journalism. You're going around to these art events, let's say Art Basel, where it's visual overstimulation. You really have to know, what you like or what you think is good and what you want to focus on when you're writing an article. So in that sense, it really kind of trained my eye, and obviously then honed my skills even more with photography. And then, explored my writing skills even more with writing the articles. And then it really got to also, for instance, with the web development. And, at that time it was pretty early. So I was working a lot with, developing the site and things like that, and the more technical side, which I am very technical as well. I'm obviously a little bit of a geek, which is, we'll get to the Bitcoin side of things. But yeah, I mean, without Bob, I don't know I would have ever formed Pork Belly Times. And to this day, while the website is not up, I could contact, let's say, Westwood Gallery in New York, or a number of people who I work with, and everybody remembers Pork Belly Times and my two-headed pig logo and all of these things. But yeah, Bob was essential in that whole journey. And the exposure to his archive, got me to see how he captured those images, and then of course influenced my work. And yeah, he was a very influential force in my life, kind of like a fatherly figure. And yeah, I don't know, it's just a powerful thing. He passed away in his mid 80s, and it was a number of years ago. But yeah, his archive and his images and everything still lives on, and that's kind of what I see in what we're doing today.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was going to say there's a beautiful kind of parallel with legacy, but before we get there, and we did have a perfect segue with your, interest in web dev and HTML and code and whatnot, but I don't want to, that's next. I want to just jump back to, well, you still do it. However, I'm curious the impact and just the experience of being an actor or doing ads. I know you also do, voice jobs as well. What do you call them? What do you call that in the job?
Acting, yeah.
Voiceover acting as well. Pardon me. Yeah. Tell us about that aspect of you and how that also must influence the way in which you think and feel and create.
Yeah, I see, acting, voice acting, we're utilizing a tool that's very much ourselves. And, acting is, creating in the moment. It's making, strong choices. So, it's obviously it's an art. It's an art to it, and it's live in the moment. And, if you're doing it on film, maybe you can cut and go back and, do it again. But, if you're an actor on stage, it's live. It's that you're making those decisions in the moment. You're in character. You're creating a character. You're a voice actor utilizing your voice, doing accents and, all of these things that I've always enjoyed. And that's more of the entertainment side of things for me, I guess. And that, I like to be expressive. Although if you hang out with me, I'm very chill and very laid back. But when I turn it on, it's this switch, and I get to enjoy that. And I like to obviously make people laugh and entertain. So yeah, that there's something very special about acting. And I wouldn't say I don't know that I'm the best actor, but I do appreciate, the journey of exploring and, creating new characters and creating new voices. And, when you book something, it's like somebody's letting you're good enough for this. And so you get to explore that. But Yeah, the focus for me with that is film and TV, really. So to get the opportunity to create those characters. In Florida, there is a lot of commercial work, so that's really a lot of what the work is here, which is looking good and smiling and holding a product. And so you have to have a bit of vanity for that. But yeah, it's full-fledged creativity. Like I don't really want to limit myself, which is probably what a lot of people see in my work. There's not a ton of, let's say, I mean, when you hear me tell the story, you see the focus, but I guess, there is a wide range. I'm very, very diverse, especially in that, the technical side and the creative side with acting and, coding or what have you. There's a lot of opportunity and, yeah, with the mental health side of things mixed in, I know our time is short, so I'd rather just explore it all and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that that's really well put, and it's interesting. You've really sort of like had experience across like the breadth of different arts, like you mentioned before with writing. Writing is an art, acting is an art, this, conversation is an art, creating a website is an art, that the list goes on. So yeah, you had experience creating the Pork Belly Times. Like you said, you even mentioned it in your introduction, and just then, explored, HTML code. Um, and now you've put that on Bitcoin. So how was your introduction to Bitcoin? And then let's chat about your art inscribed on Bitcoin. But, first, maybe how you got to Bitcoin. And then how did you find ordinals, or what was your introduction there?
Yeah. So my journey basically took me from, I think it was, I started on crypto.com's marketplace where, I had started collecting an artist's work. I became friends with the artist, and he was the one, like I mentioned, who really influenced me and gave me the confidence to explore creating and putting my own work on the blockchain. That was during full bull, and that was sometime in late 21. And Ethereum was, of course, it was not really feasible for an artist to just go, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and mint some work because it was just obscenely expensive. But I saw this opportunity of, putting work on the blockchain in general, of having digital work, no gatekeeping, putting it out there for everybody to see all around the world. And of course, my mindset at the time was it's going to be there forever. As my journey went on, it was like understanding the technical side of things more, and then exploring manifold contracts and getting involved in, on-chain art. So, had this great interest in art on chain, for instance, on Ethereum, and then seeing that with on-chain Monkey, for instance, and basically being involved in that community. And the catalyst for Bitcoin was when, first of all, Violetta Zeroni, going back to her, who I met in the beginning, right? I met Violetta in the beginning. She's a very good friend of mine, and she saw in me how I create. And she knew that Bitcoin was the right canvas for me. So basically, towards the end of my journey in creating and minting work on Ethereum, which really focused on photography and really large files, I started to get obsessive about literally minting and listing at the same time of every day, getting into numerology, 6:36 a.m. or p.m. I would only mint at that specific time. I would list at that time. I was exploring AI, numerology, time, all of these things that were already like inherent to Bitcoin and creating on that canvas. So Violetta was like, Steven, you need to get onto Bitcoin. And, On-Chain Monkey at that time was starting to transition the Genesis monkeys onto Bitcoin. So I had my Genesis monkey, and I didn't, full disclosure, I did not own any Bitcoin prior to that point. I had very little exposure. And really that was because of, I had serious reservations because I did understand that it's the mother chain. I have great respect for that. And then if you're going to create something on there, as I started to understand, I didn't want to just do that half-heartedly. If you see something that's at the top of the mountain and you're going to put something there, you want it to be the most profound thing, at least for me, that you're ever going to create. So I spoke to a number of people, including, Good Things, for instance, is a good friend of mine. And, I talked to him and it was one day when I actually sat down, Violetta was like, okay, let me take the time and go over like ordinals theory and kind of, rare sats and all of these things. And all of a sudden it clicked. And I just went, oh, okay, I can do all of these things with the canvas of Bitcoin. I can incorporate the narrative into my art. I can Originally I wasn't even thinking of putting generative art onto Bitcoin. I was going, what kind of image could I put? What kind of low file size, and just slap an image on there. But then when it all clicked, I go, okay, generative art is the perfect medium really for Bitcoin. It's code on code. And then incorporating the narrative into the canvas and vice versa. I knew, like, there was creating within that moment, right? And that's where the first collection came. But having that moment where it just all made sense, I knew there was, like, really, I don't think of anything else. Like, I think of art on Bitcoin like all day, and but it took that full understanding, and with the utmost respect of the chain. But when it all made sense, that was it. That was the moment where it's just like it clicked. So
Yeah, and it's funny because it's quite a common story with Bitcoin. Until it makes sense, it doesn't make sense, and then at that moment where it makes sense, nothing else makes sense. Part of my repetition there. Um, yeah, it's fascinating, and I actually love that ordinals as a concept brought people to Bitcoin or brought new market participants to Bitcoin, because culture, as you know through all of your experience, culture is the thing that drives society. Like all movements are driven through some kind of culture, and there's an arts as a part of uh, all movements, whether they be political or simply art movements or just like changes in like world affairs. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I love that. And so, let's pull up your first collection, which is still minting. People can come and have a look at it and mint one on Gala. Cosmogenesis, which again, you talked about your like web dev and HTML skills. This is obviously clearly a long form generative piece, generative collection, pardon me. Tell us all about it.
yeah, so Cosmogenesis, early on, and being exposed to the on-chain monkey community, I was exposed to a number of impressive, very, very, very smart minds, including, Rabbi and Heavy D. And, conceptually, my work with Cosmogenesis was there, and I'll kind of get into the ethos and foundation, how it was created. But again, having a influential force of people who understand, or the technical side of things, or can really elevate the work in ways that I didn't really fully understand. Again, it's back to education. So they were kind of essential in helping me get this created and get it onto Bitcoin, and understanding all of the things you can do with generative work on Bitcoin. So the other thing that you have to understand for me is I also have a cardiac history. My father has a cardiac history. My brother-in-law was a heart transplant patient. So in that, and with Bitcoin, I see this opportunity to bring the artwork to life, and the idea that it can live forever on Bitcoin. So Cosmogenesis is my Genesis generative art collection on Bitcoin. And as you can see, part of the journey and all of the influential people, and my background and my upbringing in the 80s, and the color, and kind of this concept of circles, right? Circles are part of pretty much all of my work. You'll see the circle everywhere. And the circle, for me, encapsulates life itself. There's no beginning, there's no end. It's the most recognized symbol in human history. Divinity, infinity. It's been used in so many cultures. And then you tie in these bright, vivid color palettes, which tie into 80s pop art. Also, the juxtaposition of color and depression, and then expressing emotions through the art. And then with the cardiac history, this is all very personal, in that you give the work a pulse, and you do it on Bitcoin, and you literally bring it to life. So Cosmogenesis was created as 256 pieces, unique one of ones, all individual, these vivid color palettes that the reason for 256 pieces is SHA-256. It's all very much founded in Bitcoin itself. When that light bulb went off and I understood, how Bitcoin operates, how ordinals operate, ordinals theory, everything made sense in that, okay, I can use this code, I can bring this work to life on Bitcoin, I can incorporate all of these elements of SHA-256, I can, I can create this work where, and here's like, for instance, where Rabbi and Heavy D were, kind of essential in my understanding of like what you can do. Okay, you can then take this code and, you can export it. So it's like it becomes, and I think it's maybe one of, or if not the first collection where you can actually export directly from the work on chain, PNGs and GIFs. So it's work that it's, let's say, art that generates art or life that generates life. And you can create infinitely from your cosmogenesis. So in this work, if you go to any piece and you press I on your keyboard, you get the menu, right? So then the menu shows you how you can interact with the work. So it's fully interactive, and then you can explore all of the things you can do with the work. The export features, you have to be on the inscription directly. So if you went to like ordinals.com and explored it there. But yeah, you can export from the work. So the other thing is when you're looking at the menu there, the logo that you see is my grandparent inscription. Again, I went really deep with the ordinals theory. That grandparent inscription, that signature logo, was inscribed on a black sat that was from my birthday, 10/18, which is coming up, in 2017, which was the year I got into crypto. So all of this is very deeply rooted in really every element you can think of with ordinals theory. I mean, I went off the deep end, and as far as like working, with my developers, it was like, I mean, you can go off the deep end, but it has to make sense. And all of these things made sense. So everything just made sense, and it really just all fits into the collection. So what you see is this simple pulsing visual, but it's very much founded in, my medical history, the mental health and all of these things, the technical side of things, the infinite creation, the living forever. And even within the inscription sequence itself of the way I utilize the sats, everything is sequentially inscribed with all of my work, but with cosmogenesis specifically, again, encapsulating the narrative of life, which is very important to me with the cardiac history, with depression, suicidal ideations, all of these things. I started with 6 alpha sats, and then this obviously getting to the technical side. 6 alpha sats, 244 block 9 450X, the earliest sats, and then I closed the inscription sequence with 6 omega sats. So literally, even within the inscription sequence itself, the narrative of life is there. So that's the other reason, for instance, why it is still available for mint. Because to me, having the collection mint out, for one, is bringing it to life, right? That's part of the journey of the work. Also understanding that it doesn't have to sell. We have this concept that something has to sell immediately for it to be a success. The work is a success as soon as it's released to the world, right? And that's Rick Rubin, right? I mean, the art of everything. There is an art to everything. So I know that the work is there. It's literally a part of me. I'm very connected to it. So yeah, it's, I mean, I could go on, but yeah, it's, there's a lot of details to it. There's a lot of Easter eggs that I haven't even mentioned. And I really encourage people to explore it and to explore creating with it, because you can literally create infinitely. You can DJ the artwork to music. It's really endless.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing all of that. And people definitely need to dive a little bit deeper. I was sort of scrolling through and, like you said, jumped onto ordinals.com, the Explorer, and saw that one, or a couple of them that I showed, were on block 9 sats, and not just block 9, but like you said, the sequential block 9 sats. So those earliest 450X ones, which were the first ones, mined by Hal Finney, which is, there's so many cool nerding out things that I absolutely love about it as well. And like you said, you've brought it to life. It's eternally pulsing. It's pre-inscribed. It's existing. It lives there, whether or not, doesn't matter what wallet it's in. It's it's living on Bitcoin. So there's so many, I guess, amazing metaphors. It's quite a different collection that you've also released. So I'd love to bring it up. you know, there might be parallels you'll have to share, but I'm not sure. You know, with Floropop, um, in comparison to, cosmogenesis, it's kind of nice to kind of show that, that variance in which way you create. I think color wise, there must be parallels. Maybe I'm just, I don't think I'm guessing there. It's kind of like an obvious one, but yeah, tell us about Floropop.
So, being again that I'm an 80s baby,
Mm,
influenced, of course, by like Keith Haring and Andy Warhol and, these artists, you can see the influence. So Flora Pop was drawn in 2021. Um, I actually have to be in this mental state of not so good. I tend to create a lot of my work when I'm at my worst. And Flora Pop was one of those creations. I was actually incredibly ill. They weren't sure what was wrong with me, and I was creating a lot of work as an expression, as a cathartic experience to try to feel better in creating something. There was really not much intention to ever release it. I'm actually a little bit self-conscious about this work. And it came to be uh and it got into Bitcoin through hosting my art spaces. And it was at the time when the mempool actually started to really drop, and it was like, okay, well, maybe there's an opportunity for me to put these pieces onto Bitcoin. But again, it was okay. These are images, right? These are static images. For me, that doesn't really do much. There has to be something that can incorporate the chain itself, right? And you can do something that elevates the work because they're talking about this canvas ordinals theory and all these things you can do. So again, it went back to my developers that go, oh, well, these can be, converted to SVGs. And then generatively, you can program each region. So each piece is effectively it's the same basis, with all unique color palettes that I just obsessed over for months, picking the color palettes. And each piece dynamically changes every season. The petal colors will change. So every season in the code, based on Bitcoin blockchain time, they're self-contained SVGs. Within that SVG, there's the code. It will tell the petals to change based on the time of the Bitcoin blockchain. So with that, the visual and the narrative behind that is you're going, and people go, well, why the dollar sign? So if we're talking about the concept of creating work that's alive and living forever on Bitcoin, and in this case, blooming forever on Bitcoin, changing dynamically forever, the idea that fiat is dead and we're creating this life on Bitcoin. So it's again this juxtaposition of eternal life, um, blooming forever, living forever, and that, this segue away from fiat itself and the death of fiat, if you will. So it's these flowers that live forever and the death of fiat and this juxtaposition. And then, of course, the bright color palettes that you see, you're right, it's 100% tied into a lot of the same colors of Cosmogenesis, probably some of the exact same color codes, because I do reuse a lot of the same palettes. And so, yeah, the work changes dynamically. It incorporates those color palettes. It's bright, it's vivid, it's pop art rooted in my upbringing. It's inscribed sequentially on block 9450X. You can also click each Flora pop and it will propagate the signature in the lower left-hand corner. I think that's the collection parent that you're looking at. If you go to one of the pieces, you can actually click it and then it will propagate the inscription of the parent logo. So in that, going back to kind of the traditional side of things, I saw this opportunity with parent-child where I could have my signature, like in a traditional sense almost, appear on the work. So in this case, that's where it really shines. In Cosmogenesis, you see it in the menu. In Flora Pop, you see it. You can turn it on and off. So the collector or end user could then, let's say, export the work with or without the artist's signature, if you will. So yeah, I mean, Flora Pop is definitely different. It's kind of my exploration of the diversity. It's exploring and really having the opportunity to show people this side of my work. Um, and it's fun work. I'm still very self-conscious about it. I know it can be a bit polarizing, and it is supposed to be a little bit off-putting again because we're touching on things that are, you know, we're, if we're talking about suicidal ideations, mental health, and things like that. And let's say then you're incorporating like fiat and Bitcoin, and then the death of fiat. If we're talking about death, it's a little bit off-putting. So it's bright, it's colorful, it's live forever, it's dynamically changing. It incorporates all of these, theories and concepts that you can. Um, and yeah, it's definitely something different. I actually had no intention of ever releasing this work. My second collection, Ecstasy, is also inscribed on Bitcoin. It was inscribed about a year ago. It's not revealed. And that was kind of always kind of my path, is from cosmogenesis to ecstasy. But because of my involvement within the space and hosting spaces and people kind of hyping me up to really kind of create. And then it wasn't just a matter of creation, it was creative innovation, in that I was like, okay, I didn't just take these images, I found a way to take these images and elevate them and make them dynamic. And also, that was really something that was really exciting to me, is to make work that's dynamic and can change over time. I didn't have that opportunity with Cosmogenesis. Technically, it wasn't really an available feature. So with Floropop was the first exploration of that, which I'll explore more with my next collection. But yeah, it's an exciting, unique collection. It's exploring pop art on Bitcoin. It's exploring art in a way that I don't think a lot of people have explored. Um, so yeah, Floropop's 48 pieces, and it's exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and there's always so much more to unpack. And for those, let's like call it, who are kind of in a more of like a nerdy way, you can have a look at the code and you can play around with it. And it's interesting actually with the signatures, is that obviously parent child is like tying something to a signature, but in the physical art world, artists traditionally, not always, but traditionally sign their work. I think that there's something to that. I actually think that perhaps we don't see it enough, and I like that you've given the option for the collector to either view it or not view it. Kind of like up to them. Uh, yeah, like you said, polarizing is good. Art is meant to evoke emotion. You've had that experience. You've worked in those different fields, from commercial right through to creative, where I'm sure you've seen art that has evoked emotion in you and art that hasn't evoked emotion in you. I'm sure that that's been impactful.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it's and not just that. It's having the opportunity to get to know artists directly. In some cases, mentor artists, interviewing artists, and understanding that the creative mind can be a bit challenged by these things, these mental health things, these neurodiversities, and that we're similar and alike in a lot of those ways. So yeah, it's an expression, right? And it's like, it's interesting to know that, for instance, Floropop was created at a time where they didn't know what was wrong with me. Like I wasn't sure what was going to be next, and that was just this created within the moment with no intention of putting it onto Bitcoin or exploring that. But yeah, I mean, as far as like having the opportunity to explore other people's work and seeing how they express themselves, on top of that, combined with the educational background and just my age and background, it really opens up your mind creatively. Um, so combined with, I don't know, my conceptual nature, you can see within my work, it's simple visual, maybe for instance, with this highly conceptual, highly technical background that you wouldn't see unless you took the time. And that's something, again, I emphasize for people. It doesn't matter if you're purchasing any of the work, mine or anybody else's, to really take the time to explore the work, explore the artists, understand the intent, understand the message, and that can lead you to connecting to the work more and relating to the artist. It's the same thing when you go into a gallery or a museum. You look at a piece, and maybe from there you look at the wall tag and you see who the artist is and you see the story behind it. Maybe you sit there on your phone and explore. Maybe you sit down and you're just staring at the work. I mean, it's really about taking the time. And then in this case, if the work is going to be there forever, we have all the time in the world. Well, hopefully, if there's no major catastrophe or something like that. But that concept is really, yeah, profound to me for sure. And then again, it's like signing the work, having that opportunity to sign the work with my signature logo, with my name, right? It's fully doxed. It's not hiding from these things. It's wearing my heart on my sleeve. And my story is there. I don't really talk about my work too much. So even us discussing it here is a pretty rare moment. But if anybody asks, yeah, I mean, I'm an open book.
Yeah, well, I think that that's a beautiful place to kind of wrap up, Stephen, because sometimes people just look at a piece of art and maybe it strikes them, maybe it doesn't, but context is so important. And that's why I think conversations like this are so powerful. And so thank you for spending the time with us. And like you said, you don't talk about it often. I think it's important to talk about, or at least people, I hope, spend the time to listen to this conversation, because when you learn more, it can completely change the way that you view a piece of art. So on that note, Stephen, if there's anything that I didn't ask you, please share with us now. But thanks so much for spending the time and for opening up and telling your story and talking about at least the collections. I know that Ecstasy's on chain, but talking about Cosmogenesis and Flora Pop in more detail too.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, really, just thank you for the opportunity and sitting down. I mean, it's a pleasure. I enjoy these opportunities and to talk about the work, and hopefully people take the time to get to know the work better, and maybe to get to know me better and understand, yeah, what's behind it. So thank you.